What's going on, guys? Polygon Don here, and today I want to talk about cheap physical Vita games in 2021 and what to look out for as a newcomer to the handheld. Now, this video started off as a guide of what to get from the Vita PSN store before it closed its gates for good, but then Sony miraculously did a complete 180 on that decision. So instead, I decided to do a quick buying guide for physical Vita games in 2021. Now, I'm based in the UK, so the prices are going to reflect that. However, the games I've chosen sell for around the same price in Europe and US once you've taken currency conversion into account. But with all that said, let's get into it. Alright guys, first up we've got Rayman Origins. Not much needs to be said about Rayman. Most of you are going to be familiar with the floating appendages of our platforming funny man, so I won't need to go into a great deal of introduction. But the game starts with the granny of the underworld reaching the end of her tether as Rayman and chums drive her to the point of madness with all the ruckus and noise. Clearly having enough of it all, she decides to release an army of underworld underlings to wreak havoc on Rayman's world, and it's all down to our little hero to put things right. It's straight up solid platforming joy, this one. There's secrets, collectibles and humour everywhere, and you'll be pleasantly entertained for hours on end. The levels are colourful, smart and varied, with stunning hand-drawn 2D visuals and a world that moves and interacts as you run through it. If you happen to have the original OLED Vita model, then this game absolutely shines off of that screen and looks fantastic. Occasionally mixing up genres, switching it up from traditional platformer to arcade shooter for example, it keeps you engaged throughout and features cleverly designed bosses to beat at the end of each world. The music is also a standout element of the game, with incredibly catchy tunes to run, jump, swing and explode to. If you haven't played a Rayman game before, then this is an excellent entry point. And if you have but want the ability to play it on the go, then this Vita version is stunning and definitely worth picking up. Worth noting that while there are two Rayman titles released on the Vita, this one does tend to get overshadowed by its more impressive and lengthier counterpart, Rayman Legends, and therefore sometimes overlooked. Legends is the better game, featuring a lot of the levels from Origins, so if you're only going to get one Rayman title, then definitely get Legends, but if you're trying to boost your Vita collection as frugally as possible, then this is a great place to start. A brilliant game and still very cheap to buy physically at around £10 to £15 complete in box and around £5 for a loose cart.
CDC descending to a safe level.
All units switching to strike mode.
All further orders to be taken from strike mode. Strike mode prep is complete, sir.
Okay, zone 1 is doing great.
And second, we've got Aegis of Earth Protonovus Assault. Aegis of Earth is essentially a tower defense game with light city management mechanics. The difference between Aegis of Earth and other tower defense games is the tower you're defending in Aegis of Earth is a 360-degree rotating city that's armed to the teeth. The game is set 50 years after a deadly event known as the Silent Apocalypse brought previously unknown creatures into the world driven to destroying humanity. Accompanying the arrival of the creatures was a new element called Alternite, which when harvested and processed stands as humanity's last hope for the survival of their species. As a result, the remaining humans formed fortified cities above large deposits of the element and protected it from various assaults. The main gameplay is split between two stages, the first being the planning stage, which centres around city management and strategic weaponry placement, and the second being the wave-based tower defence style battle sequences. In the planning stage, you will take control of these rotating cities, expanding and fortifying them to ensure the inhabitants are safe. Doing so will result in an increase in overall city happiness, making it more desirable for others to join and in turn increasing your population. Through taxation, this also increases the city's income, allowing you to purchase better equipment, upgrade existing units, and generally prepare for the inevitable battles ahead. Speaking of battles, this brings us to the second main mode of the game, and that is the wave-based enemy encounters that you have to protect the city from. As the player, you'll gain full control of the city's rotating rings on which it is built, and as a result, the ability to change the position of the weapons and equipment you placed in the prior planning stage. This is great news as enemies can attack from a full 360 degrees and can appear at a moment's notice. However, careful prior planning can have some added benefits. When lined up together in battle, some units are able to merge with one another in order to form more powerful versions of themselves, providing more damage output and range. Overall, it's a really fun gameplay loop, and it's always satisfying to see your character, or in this case city, level up, gaining new tech from the R&D department and hitting the battlefield to test out the city's new toys or gaining new operatives, etc. The characters also are really memorable. There's plenty of quippy dialogue to keep you entertained both in and out of battle. And at around 25 to 30 hours, this has a pretty substantial amount of content to keep you occupied with. And even if you're not traditionally a big fan of tower defense games, I think this is unique enough with its mechanics and anime art style that it's definitely worth picking up and trying out. Especially as it's still relatively cheap to buy in the second-hand market, between £15 and £20 complete and about £10 for a loose copy. Alright, and next up we've got Need for Speed Most Wanted. There's a few good driving games on the Vita, but this one has always stood out for me just for its sheer scope of content and its overall execution and polish. A port from the PS3 release, it plays exceptionally well on the little handheld that could, and looks stunning thanks to the developers at Criterion. It's a fully open world map that doesn't skimp on size and activities, with a massive selection of licensed cars to unlock and drive. Every car unlocked also means a new set of challenges, so this has an abundance of content to comb through, providing hours and hours of entertainment. It's the perfect pick up and play title, being able to quickly hop in and tackle a speed challenge or race, but it's also great to really sink your teeth into for an evening, finally tuning up the cars in your garage before heading out to compete in the more difficult races. All the challenges are exhilarating and keep you on the edge of your seat thanks to the level design combined with a smart and sometimes tricky AI. They can make some races frustrating at times, but whenever that does happen, the game offers so much in the way of alternatives for you to consider that abandoning and moving on never feels like a cop-out. You just go back and reattempt it once you have a faster car or have finely tuned the cars already in your garage, and job done. The added element of police interference during races and challenges definitely keeps it from feeling stale. Having to avoid laid out spike traps and outmaneuver pursuing cop cars, all while trying to come first in a race with your car still intact, definitely gets the adrenaline levels up and provides a great feeling of satisfaction upon getting that coveted first place spot and its subsequent rewards. It's a fantastic driving game for long-term fans of the genre, but equally as accessible and most importantly fun for people who just want a quick racing fix to get the blood pumping. Honestly, there's so much stuff to do in this game and provides a huge amount of value for money. Still very much affordable in the second-hand market at around £12 to £18 complete and £10 to £15 loose. This is a must-own title for any Vita owner.
Code 3 suspect detained. I say again, Code 3 suspect detained. We have him.
And next up we've got Deception 4 Blood Ties. Now this is a strange one, not gonna lie, both in its gameplay mechanics and its story, but it's one of those strangely odd and addictive games that you almost play just to see what more weird stuff you'll find in there. At its core, it's a strategy game, but honestly it's unlike any other strategy game I've ever played. Not claiming to have played them all by any means, but I've never played anything like this within that subgenre. It's definitely stood out the most for me. You'll play as Lagrina, the Devil's daughter, who was created from a fragment of his soul after 12 warriors known as the Saints seal away the devil using holy verses. You will be tasked with locating them to effectively break the spell and release him. The aim of the game is to defeat your enemies using a variety of traps that vary between 3 categories: brutality, magnificence and humiliation. It's not turn-based, it's live action, and enemies can and will run up and attack you all they want, but you will have to defeat them exclusively using traps, which quite frankly is just mental, but I'm totally here for it. And the fact that there's a humiliation combo count in this game got my vote immediately, to be honest. The traps themselves are the stars of the show, in all honesty, with there being such a mad variety of ideas and options even from the offset, but there's so much more to unlock throughout your playthrough, and mixing them up to get the perfect combo is a lot of fun. During combat moments, you essentially pause the game and enter into a top-down view of your surroundings with a grid overlay so that you can place your traps in their desired locations and the order you want them to be activated in. Once ready, you'll lure the enemy to the first trap and activate it. Planting them in strategic areas to link together traps is where the big points come in, and that's what brings us to the arcadey element of the game. Essentially, you want to maximise the amount of damage you do to each enemy within the 3 categories and defeat them as quickly as possible, all while dodging and avoiding the attacks coming your way. It's utterly bonkers, to be honest with you, but as I said earlier, strangely compelling and very satisfying. The writing and animation style are really cool too. I've got a bit of a thing for games developed in Japan but with a Western medieval or Victorian setting and aesthetic. Probably stemmed from Symphony of the Night and solidified with Dark Souls and Bloodborne. But I just love that take or that perspective of that world and history, which was reason enough for me to check this out in the first place. But after playing it, I can honestly say I've never played anything else like it. Definitely worth picking up for any strategy game fans out there, but I also think this is just weird enough to warrant a place in any curious game collector's collection. Hitting an average of around £25 on eBay for a complete copy, at about £18 for a loose one. It's one of the more expensive titles on this list, but that is still very cheap for a niche game like this on the Vita. I can't see that lasting long though, so if you are interested, I'd act on this one sooner rather than later.
You know, Bats, I've always known you use your cape to disguise exactly where your body is. But I think this is the first time I've actually seen how it works. Nice.
What angle are you working here? Which of the 3 kingpins hired you?
All of them. Not that they know that. Triple pay for a single job. I told each one I'd be their man, protecting them from cops or whatever else tried to storm the prison. And bad news for you, Bats. You definitely qualify as whatever else.
Alright guys, and next up we've got Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate. Now Blackgate is a direct sequel / companion game to Batman Arkham Origins, released on the PS3 and Xbox 360. Set 3 months after the events of Arkham Origins, Blackgate on the Vita follows Batman as he attempts to stop a prison riot at the Blackgate Penitentiary after it has been taken over by 3 of Gotham City's big bads: the Joker, the Penguin and Black Mask. This provides the setting to the game, with the prison being split into 3 sectors, and provides a Metroidvania-like form of exploration through them all, unlocking new areas and pathways as Batman discovers the weapon and gadget upgrades dotted around the map. Playing as Batman, you'll defeat inmates and thugs using a similar form of the combat system found in the original Arkham games, but as this is set in a 2.5D environment and not fully 3D, the enemies can only really approach you from left or right, and loses some of the thrill factor of the original combat system as a result. It's still enjoyable to floor a room full of enemies without taking a single hit, but the overall feeling of its combat has suffered, it's got to be said. The stealth and detective mode gameplay mechanics have also been implemented here, but again, due to the Vita's much smaller processing power when compared to the PS3, have had to be watered down and simplified slightly in order to perform well on the handheld. However, the devs did use some tricks here and there to hide the downgrade from a fully 3D world to a 2.5D one, such as the camera zooming over Batman's shoulders as he uses his grappling hook or opens doors, etc. Some of the boss fights were really cool too. One that comes to mind was Deadshot's encounter, a fight taking place entirely from his perspective, where you have to evade his sniper shots whilst choosing the right moment to run between cover, eventually making it to him and putting an end to his nonsense. While the plot is okay, it's nothing really to write home about. However, if you're a fan of Batman and own a Vita, then you should definitely give this a go. Equally, if you've played through the mainline Arkham games on the PS3 or Xbox and want a little more of its world and lore to explore, then this is certainly worth considering. Once a Vita exclusive, there are now more definitive versions of the game available. However, it feels great as a handheld game and still very much affordable to buy physically for the Vita at around £18 complete in box and an average of about £12 for the cart alone. It's not the best game on this list, but it definitely shouldn't be overlooked either.
Give me the codes for the crypto sequencer and we'll end this here.
No, I don't think so. I'm going to the Warden's office to finish my alterations while you go find the Warden. I won't even make you search, that's how gracious a host I am. The Warden's in the conference room. He's tied up in a meeting, and tempers are running high. Getting explosive, you might say.
Alright guys, next up we've got Grand Kingdom. And Grand Kingdom is a turn-based tactical RPG that feels right at home on the Vita. It's also available on the PS4, but I would highly recommend the Vita version, as having these games on the go just makes more sense in my opinion. After the fall of the once prosperous Aldine Empire over 100 years ago, 4 great nations now wage war with one another to claim dominion over the Reasonale continent. Battles are no longer fought by honourable knights loyal to a nation, but by mercenaries who sell their services to the highest bidder. This is where you'll come in. As the leader of a group of mercs, it will fall to you to lead your troops across a battle-scarred continent, overcoming obstacles and adversaries as you complete quests, eventually unravelling the mystery behind the downfall of a once mighty empire. As mentioned before, this is a turn-based RPG, but both its overworld and battle sequences have their own unique spin, setting them apart from other games in the genre. The overworld is represented by an isometric map and consists of a linear path that occasionally branches off, and at first glance looks a lot like a board game. There's obstacles and random events dotted throughout, so working through the missions never feels too samey and the time between battles doesn't get boring. The missions themselves usually revolve around either reaching a particular destination on the map, finding certain items, or killing a required amount of enemies. Which brings us to the battle sequences. Enemies are represented by chess pieces, and coming into contact with one will result in the scene shifting to a 2D battlefield, with your team of mercs on one side and the enemy on the other. The battlefield, like its accompanying overworld, again takes a unique approach and works on an almost lane-like system. As an example, archers or mages are able to inflict damage on anyone in a single lane, not just the first enemy in the queue. Equally, all characters are governed by movement and action gauges, which determines how far a unit can move on a given turn. The early stages allow you to pretty much brute force your way through, but as the game progresses and the enemies get smarter, charging in will quickly get you surrounded and your party overwhelmed. The later battles take on a greater level of complexity and feel more like puzzles when you'll need to consider team composition a lot more. There was a massive online component to the game, allowing you to take on contracts, battle other players and trade, etc, but unfortunately the servers for the game shut down in 2019. That being said, the single player campaign is meaty enough on its own, to be honest, and will provide dozens of hours of play. The Western releases of the game included a wealth of DLC already on the carts, such as additional character classes and 4 full campaigns with 9 missions in each. I certainly haven't ever felt that the content was lacking with this one, and definitely didn't miss the online component. For the sheer breadth of content and its unique take on a classic gaming formula, I think this is definitely worth giving a go. There's lots of copies still available online, and you'll be looking at around £18 for a complete in-box one and about £15 for a loose cart. But there are still new and sealed copies available if that's more your thing, at around £30. And there's even a deluxe collector's edition with loads of extra goodies still available, and I've seen it as low as £40. Whichever you pick, for the moment at least, will be great value for money.
I'll let Lily explain the rest. A mercenary's occupation is dependent on their skill. Work hard for yourselves, but above all, work hard for the good of the guild.
Alright guys, next up we've got Freedom Wars. Developed exclusively for the Vita by Japan Studios and released in 2014, Freedom Wars is a third-person Japanese action role-playing game with an intriguing story and addictive action gameplay. Using an alternate sci-fi reality as its backdrop and set thousands of years in the future, the Earth's surface has become completely uninhabitable, forcing humans to retreat underground. Societal norms disintegrated and countries have ceased to exist, replaced by penal states known as panopticons, where its inhabitants are obligated to contribute to the state in exchange for security and safety from the harsh new world outside. However, due to overpopulation, famine, lack of resources, etc., each panopticon has developed conflicts with each other, and large portions of the populace are forced into serving sentences in order for the cities to maintain effective control, essentially forming a collective of dystopian surveillance societies at war with each other. The player assumes the role of either a male or female customizable protagonist who receives a prison sentence of 1,000,000 years for the crime of living, and is forced to battle giant monsters called abductors as punishment. Defeating the abductors, which are known to capture the civilians of panopticons, reduces the criminal's sentence, and all criminals have their rights stripped away and can only be regained gradually through labour. You can't even lie back after a long day until the state deems you've earned the right to. You'll also get to customize your accessory, which is the term used for the dual-purpose android that will serve as a partner during combat encounters, as well as a 24-hour walking surveillance unit monitoring your behavior and relaying information back to the state. The missions themselves generally revolve around you fighting against giant mechanized weapons known as abductors and rescuing the scientific researchers known as civilians that have been captured by them. They're usually held captive in the giant's chest, and you have to whittle the health of the abductor down in order to grant an opportunity to break the civilian free. This can be done using gunplay or melee combat, the most effective method that I found being to amputate the limbs of the abductor, radically reducing its overall damage output and weakening it in the process. It's a massive action RPG with some really cool gameplay mechanics such as the grappling whip known as the Thorn, which allows you to zip across the battlefield or up tall buildings and pull the giant enemies to the ground, as well as issuing commands to your android accessory, giving each battle a strategic element which keeps the encounters fast paced and exciting. As I said, this game is big and heavy on the grind, and I'm nowhere near finishing it yet. We'll probably be chipping away at this for months if not years to come, but it needs a spot on this list and potentially a spot in your collection, as this is a Vita exclusive with extremely high production value and a great story that's readily available on the second-hand market and still reasonably affordable at around £20 complete and £10 for a loose copy. Okay, so that was 7 still relatively cheap Vita games to consider for any newcomers to the handheld. I mean, I don't expect the prices to stay that way for too long, to be honest, so if any did take your fancy, I say act sooner rather than later. But that's it for this one. The next video will probably be another PS4 Hidden Gems guide, to be honest. I'll probably do a volume 2 on that, as there's still so many games I want to talk about on that system. So subscribe if that's something that might interest you. But until next time, take care and game on.